Well guys, it nearly took 2 years to get here, but it's finally here. Monster MD. Now some of you might see this review and wonder, was this book worth the wait? Well, I'm gonna say yes. Now when I first saw this book on Indiegogo, I was instantly sold on it, mainly just because of the art alone. I've mentioned it before, but I'm really into expressive art styles. And I think Marco really does a good job in capturing the characters and what emotions we should be feeling throughout the book. Even the fight scenes are pretty well done. The colorist really nails it. Everything just feels so naturally done. It was a match made in heaven, really. It's about a doctor who helps monsters. By choosing to help monsters, he often gets hurt in the process, causing him to rethink his career choice, which is pretty fairly reasonable. I mean, nobody really wants a job where they have the risk of getting eaten by their patients. One thing I do have to say right off the bat is be prepared for dad jokes if you're going to be reading this comic. Now, as someone who actually enjoys puns on a regular basis, even this went a little bit too far for me at times. I mean, the jokes are kind of like 50-50, right? Sometimes they hit and they hit well, and other times they just fall flat and you just, you're doing the ugly smile like, eh. There's also some jokes that would just go over my head and I'd have to like go back and reread it and, contemplate for a second before I'm like, oh, I get it. And to be honest, when I was first reading this, I found the opening to be pretty cluttered and awkward. Naturally, we open up with him helping a patient, but later on we have like a montage scene, which I thought was really good and funny. And I kind of wonder if we should have opened with that montage scene and just, included this one patient as part of that montage scene. Open with that, save the succubus scene for later, and, rather than doing the montage later. Because I feel like based on these first few pages, if I had only read those, I don't know if I would have wanted to read the rest of it, if that was like the preview that I got of the book before buying it. But once I saw the montage scene, I was like, I'm back in. So I'm thinking maybe that should have been in the beginning. Maybe that should have been like the selling point, what we open up with. Maybe some people will think that's a nitpick, but that's definitely something that would have changed my experience when reading the book. If you really want to hear more nitpicks, wait until we get into the spoiler part of this review. Lastly, I'll just say that I wasn't expecting the romance between Wyatt and his assistant Heidi. It was pretty subtle in the book, but I think that it was well done. It's definitely not the focus of the plot that the romance between them exists, but it was still an enjoyable part of the book itself. I enjoy romance, and I think that their little romance is like weird and funny and cute. Alright, so now we're gonna get into the spoiler sections of this review. If you don't want anything at all spoiled for you, then leave a like and get out. So the first thing I want to go over in more detail, I have been debating with myself for a while of whether or not his flashback sequence is necessary in this book, and I don't think it is. Now stay with me for a second here. I get his backstory, I get how it's related to the plot, but is it really anything that couldn't have been summed up with, oh, that monster is the same monster that took my arm? Do we really have to like see it unfold visually in front of us? Is there really anything in this backstory that couldn't have been verbally spoken with maybe one panel flashbacks type stuff? Like, I don't mind the idea of the flashback, but actually reading through the whole flashback sequence, I felt like it was pretty weak. I mean, I can sum it up pretty quickly for you. He saves a revenant, then another monster comes by and he's eating the dead bodies. Wyatt tries to fight him, gets his arm cut off, falls out a window. For some reason, the monster doesn't eat him after attempting to murder him. For some reason, he's totally fine and in no danger at all, wakes up, and the revenant that he saved replaces his arm with her own. And I get the idea. I get what you're going for. Had a few issues with how it was. First of all, and this is really more of a nitpick on the artist's part, it took me a while to conclude that 100% for sure she gave him her arm. I was not 100% certain until like way later where he recaps, yeah, this is her arm. Because artistically, we don't have an actual establishing shot of her being without her arm. In fact, we very specifically don't see her left arm throughout this sequence. So how am I supposed to know that's her arm? She could have, I mean, there's literally dead bodies all over the morgue. She could have just detached another guy's arm, you know, found an arm that matched his other arms, like, this is close enough to his mass and size, and just stitched it on. I would even argue that would have made more sense. You know why? Because she's a girl. He has a lady arm now. It doesn't really get talked about though. Nobody's gonna mention the fact that he got his arm replaced with a lady arm. Have you ever like held up a skinny girl's arm next to a guy's arm? There's a certain thickness that is present in a man's arm versus a female's arm. Like if I were to replace my boyfriend's arm with my arm, it would look like he had a baby arm. Like it would be drastically different looking. And you could have, you could have gave him a baby arm. It wouldn't have changed the plot that much. It would have been funny. It's just very odd that her arms are skinny when they're on her, but when she transfers it to him, all of a sudden it's the same mass as his other arm. I don't know, would it have been gay for him to take another man's arm? What's the thought process behind this flashback? Another big part of that is the idea that because he's taken a zombie arm as his own, he himself has become a monster. He's become one of them. Interesting concept, but I don't really know if that logic really holds up. I mean, to some extent I get it, it's like Frankenstein made up of dead body parts, but Frankenstein is entirely composed of dead body parts from different people to the point where it made up a new person entirely. If you took apart all of the dead body parts from Frankenstein, there'd be nothing left. Wyatt can take off that arm anytime he wants. Think about it this way. If you replace your arm with a prosthetic, does that automatically make you a robot? But I guess the term monster is kind of just used loosely throughout the book. It really, I guess, just means freak or supernatural in some way. But yeah, going back to the flashback scene, I feel like it's so easy to go over that verbally and give it some air of mystery behind it, like, oh, who was that monster back then? The plot twist at the end, plot twist, where it turns out that it was like his mentor who was the monster. Like, I don't care. Does it really matter? Is there really any difference between making it some mentor who we as the audience barely know versus a guy we don't know at all? It could have just been some dude. I don't care if it's his mentor. You're not making anyone's jaw drop to the ground with that plot twist. If it's going to be a weak flashback anyway, I'd rather not have it. Furthermore, I also thought that Heidi's story was pretty weak. That wasn't a part of the main story, of course. That was an added story later on. I was expecting like some kind of romantic way of her meeting Wyatt, but first of all, we have to hear about like her ex-boyfriend. Why would I want to see a love story between her and her ex while I'm rooting for the current couple here? But yeah, literally the way Heidi and Wyatt meet is she's how do I even... Alright, let me capture this for you so you can understand. Oh my god, you guys are so cute together. How did you meet? Well, you see, I was rustling through garbage, and he came down the alley, looked at me, and said, "Come on." It's so romantic. See the stick? Come on. Come on. You know you want to fuck me. Come on. It's just like... Come on. Both of their flashback sequences are so weak. What are you doing? Alright, moving on though. I do like the overall plot. Overall, is a good book, decent, worth the read. I enjoy Wyatt's little character arc of him not really being sure whether he wants to have a career helping monsters because he keeps on getting fucked over in the process, and it's like, well, what's the point? Which, like I said before, is pretty reasonable. He also has like some resentment for being considered a monster himself, or at least it's implied resentment. I'm not really sure if it makes much sense because he can just take off the arm whenever he wants. I mean, there are prosthetics, you know? He wants to quit, but Heidi goes out of the way to steal his van and go help a patient while he's sulking. And, you know, because of that, obviously he has to go after Heidi to make sure she's okay. Finds out that the monster who's eating other monsters is going to eat them, so he has to save the day. He is a doctor, but he's also a part-time superhero. Now, one of the things that I do love about this ending fight scene is the fact that all of those bites that he received from the monsters in the past have infected his dead arm and given him those other monsters' abilities. And it all comes together in that ending fight scene, which I thought was hilarious, but also pretty cool. I was fucking digging it. I was having fun. Another big moment after the fight scene is done is that Heidi's hurt and he has to do surgery on her, but since she's invisible, he has to like do this special UV light technology to see her. And we get to see her and damn. You should have used a UV version for the pinup. That would have been pretty fucking cool. But also, once again, the colorist, the way they depicts this UV light and how everything looks all bright and glow. It's so cool. I love it. And I found it to be like romantic and impactful, him trying to save her life. It's something that only the two of them could go through together and have it be very meaningful. You didn't need the fake death scene though. That was kind of unnecessary. And then we have the feel-good ending where like it turns out he's in the hospital and all the monsters that he's saved in the past come together to help him get better, and it goes to show that his actions weren't in vain, that he did get something in return for helping those monsters all those years, which is pretty nice. I dig it. Alright, what are the nitpicks I wanted to point out? Eric Weathers was doing the lettering, right? Let me ask you something, Eric. What the fuck is this? What is this Kercha in regular font and all caps and italics and bold? That's not the... What? Was this added in afterwards? Why does that look so out of place when it comes to the lettering? I had to mention it. I just had to. You need to know. I'd rather have the Kercha not be there than look that out of place. Lastly, nitpicking some of the art. More than I already have anyway. I think there are a lot of scenes that feel like they're being cut off, like you're not getting the full picture. A good example would be this double page spread. It looks kind of awkward, just how both their bodies fill up the page, because the villain is kind of cut off halfway, and I'm not super into it. I would have preferred if they were like more centered on the two pages. I'd like a better view of the villain as he goes flying rather than him just literally flying off the page. And I think that's about it. I think we went through the whole book. There is a side story which I believe is supposed to be a crossover comic. Shinobi Sasquatch, is that what it is? That's fucking hard to read, dude. I skimmed through the crossover comic. It seemed okay. The art was pretty great as usual, but I'm not gonna review that on here because I really just wanted to focus on the main book. If you're into action comedy, if you're into horror themed stuff, you'll probably really enjoy this. I definitely know that I did. I'd probably rate it an 8 out of 10. It was pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. And if you ever felt like doing another story with the same characters, I'd probably read it. So those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts on Monster MD? Was it worth it? Did you enjoy the book? What were your favorite parts? Favorite characters? Any and all thoughts you have, leave them down below in the comments section. Remember to like the video, subscribe if you'd like to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!
Program restart.